Hello, welcome to Bookworm Reads. I'm Bookworm, your story guide. Today we'll be reading The Magic Treehouse, number 1, Dinosaurs Before the Dark, by Mary Pope Osborne. Chapter 1, Into the Woods. Help! A monster! Said Annie. Yeah, sure, said Jack. A real monster in Frog Creek, Pennsylvania. Run, Jack, Annie said. She ran up the road. Oh, brother, thought Jack. This was what he got for spending time with his 7-year-old sister. Annie loved pretend stuff, but Jack was 8.5. He liked real things. Watch out, Jack, the monster's coming, said Annie. Jack didn't say anything. Come on, Jack, I'll race you, Annie said. No thanks, said Jack. Annie raced along into the woods. Jack looked at the sky. The sun was about to set. Come on, Annie. It's time to go home, yelled Jack. But Annie didn't answer. Jack waited. Annie, he called again. Jack, Jack! Annie shouted, come over here, quick! Jack groaned. This better be good, he said. Jack left the road and headed into the woods. The trees were lit with a golden late afternoon light. Over here, called Annie. Annie was standing under a tall oak tree. Look, she said. She pointed at the rope ladder. It was hanging down from high in the tree. Wow, Jack whispered. At the top of the tree was a treehouse, tucked between 2 branches. That must be the highest treehouse in the world, Annie said. Who built it? Asked Jack. I never seen it before. I don't know, but I'm going up, said Annie. No, we don't know who it belongs to, said Jack. Just for a teeny minute, said Annie. She started up the ladder. Annie, come back, Jack said. But Annie kept climbing. She climbed all the way up to the tallest branches. Jack sighed. Annie, it's almost dark. We have to go home. Annie disappeared inside the treehouse. Annie, Jack called. Jack waited a moment. He was about to call again when Annie poked her head out of the treehouse window. Books! Annie shouted. What? Jack said. It's filled with books, Annie said. Oh man, Jack thought. He loved books. Jack pushed his glasses into place. He gripped the sides of the rope and started up. Chapter 2. Jack crawled into the treehouse. Wow, he said. The treehouse was filled with books. Books were everywhere. Every old book was with dusty covers and new books with shiny bright covers. Look, Annie said. You can see far away. She was peering out the treehouse window. Jack looked out of the window with her. Below the tops of other trees, in the distance, he could see Frog Creek Library and the elementary school and the park. Annie pointed in the other direction. There's our house, she said. Annie was right. Jack could see their white wooden house with its green porch. In the yard next door was the neighbor's black dog, Henry. He looked very tiny. Hi, Henry, Annie shouted. Shush, we're not supposed to be up here, Jack said. Jack glanced around at the treehouse again. He noticed that bookmarks were sticking out of many books. I wonder who owns all these books, he said. I like this one. She picked up a book with the castle on the cover. Here's a book about Pennsylvania, Jack said. He turned the page with the bookmark. Hey, here's a picture of Frog Creek, said Jack. It's a picture of these woods. Oh, here's a book for you. She held up the book about dinosaurs. A blue silk bookmark was sticking out of it. Let me see, Jack said. He set his backpack down on the floor and grabbed the book from Annie. Okay, you look at that one, I'll look at this one about castles, said Annie. No, we better not, said Jack. We don't know who these books belong to. But even as he said this, Jack was opening the dinosaurs book to the place where the bookmark was. He couldn't help himself. Jack turned to a picture with an ancient flying reptile. He recognized it was a pteranodon. He touched the huge bat-like wings in the picture. Wow, Jack whispered. I wish I could go to the time of pteranodons. Jack studied the picture of the odd-looking creature soaring through the sky. Ah! Screamed Annie. What? Said Jack. A monster! Annie cried. She pointed out of the treehouse window. Stop pretending, Annie, said Jack. No, really, said Annie. Jack looked out the window. A giant creature was gliding above the treetops. It had a weird crest on the back of its head, a skinny beak, and huge bat-like wings. It was a live pteranodon. The creature swooped through the sky. It looked like a glider plane. It was coming straight towards the treehouse. Get down, cried Annie. Jack and Annie crouched on the floor. The wind started to blow. The tree started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 3. Where is here? Jack opened his eyes. Sunlight slanted through the window. The treehouse was still high up in a tree, but it wasn't the same tree. Where are we? Said Annie. She and Jack looked out the window. The pteranodon was soaring through the sky. The ground was covered with ferns and tall grass. There was a winding stream and sloping hill and volcanoes in the distance. I don't know where we are, said Jack. The pteranodon glided down to the base of the tree. It landed on the ground, and it stood very still. So, what just happened to us? Annie said. Well, Jack said, I was looking at the picture in the book, and you said, wow, I wish I could go to the time of the pteranodons, said Annie. Yeah. Then we saw the pteranodon in Frog Creek Woods, said Jack. Yeah. And then the wind got loud, and the treehouse started spinning, said Annie. And we landed here, said Jack. And we landed here, said Annie. So that means, said Jack. So that means what? Said Annie. I don't know, said Jack. He shook his head. None of this can be real. Annie looked out the window again. But he is real. He's very real. Jack looked out the window with her again. The pteranodon was standing at the base of the tree like a guard. His giant wings were spread out on either side of him. Hi, Annie shouted. Shh, Jack said. We're not supposed to be here. But where is here? Said Annie. I don't know, said Jack. Hi, who are you? Annie called to the pteranodon. The creature just looked up at her. Are you nuts? He can't talk, said Jack. But maybe the book can tell us. Jack looked down at the book. He read the words under the picture. This flying reptile lived in the Cretaceous period. It vanished 65 million years ago with the dinosaurs. That's impossible, said Jack. We can't have gone to 65 million years ago. Jack, said Annie. He's nice. Nice? Said Jack. Yeah, I can tell, said Annie. Let's go down to him. Go down? Jack said. Annie started down the rope ladder. Hey, come back, said Jack, but Annie kept going. Annie, wait, Jack called. Annie dropped to the ground. She stepped boldly up to the ancient creature. Chapter 4. Henry. Jack gasped as Annie reached out her hand towards the pteranodon. Oh no, he thought. Annie was always trying to make friends with animals, but this was going too far. Don't get too close to him, Annie, Jack shouted. Annie touched the pteranodon's chest. She stroked his neck. She was talking to him. What in the world is she saying? Jack wondered. He took a deep breath. Okay. He would go down too. It would be good to examine the pteranodon. He could take notes like a scientist. Jack started down the rope ladder. When he reached the ground, he was only a few feet away from the creature. The pteranodon stared at Jack. His eyes were bright and alert. He's soft, Jack, said Annie. He feels like Henry. Jack snorted. He's no dog, Annie. Feel him, Jack, said Annie. Jack didn't move. Don't think, Jack, just do it, Annie said. Jack stepped forwards. He reached out very cautiously. He brushed his hands down the creature's neck. Interesting. A thin layer of fuzz covered the pteranodon's skin. Soft, huh? Annie said. Jack reached into his backpack and pulled out a pencil and a notebook. He wrote, Fuzzy skin. What are you doing? Asked Annie. Taking notes, said Jack. We're probably the first people in the whole world to ever see a real live pteranodon. Jack could look at the pteranodon again. The bony crest on top of its head was no longer than Jack's arm. I wonder how smart he is, Jack asked. Very smart, Annie said. Don't count on it, said Jack. His brain's probably no bigger than a bean. No, he's very smart. I can feel it, he said. I'm going to call him Henry. Jack wrote, small brain. Jack looked at the creature again. Maybe he's a mutant, he said. The pteranodon titled his head. Annie laughed. He's not a mutant, Jack. Well, what is he doing here then? Where is his place? Said Jack. Annie leaned close to the pteranodon. Do you know where we are, Henry? She asked softly. The creature fixed his eyes on Annie. His long jaws were open and closing like a giant pair of scissors. Are you trying to talk to me, Henry? Asked Annie. Forget it, Annie. Jack wrote in his notebook. Mouth like scissors. Did we come to a time long ago, Henry? Annie asked. Is this a place from long ago? Suddenly, Annie gasped. Jack! Jack looked up. Annie was pointing towards the hill. On top of the hill stood a huge dinosaur. That's it for today, everyone. This was part 1 of Dinosaurs Before the Dark. Next time will be part 2, and see you guys all next time. Bye!